From his Super Bowl loss to the Eagles back in 2018 to his insanely public and very embarrassing spat with his wife in 2022, these are some of the most heartbreaking moments from Tom Brady's time in the limelight. I've got to start off with that loss to the Eagles, guys. Brady's lost a good few times over the course of his career, but the Super Bowl losses always sting. I mean, it makes sense, right? Imagine working hard all season for a chance at glory only to see it slip away in the final moments. It's tragic. But that's not all when it comes to Brady, because when this guy loses a Super Bowl, it's even worse than just being a painful loss. Yep, the fans actually celebrate. And the loss in 2018 against the Eagles was especially heartbreaking for Tom. Yeah, it was just a perfect storm of failure and regret because not only did Tom have one of the best seasons of his career, he also performed amazingly in that final deciding game. The man threw for 505 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he still lost. Yikes. And then there were the celebrations online with fans posting pictures of sad Brady. I mean, it was pretty funny, but I can't lie, I was sad for Tom Terrific. Plus, guys, the man's kids were right there. They saw their invincible dad get crushed into the dust. And that was the first time they'd cried after a game. Honestly, it just gets worse and worse the more you look into it. Don't believe me? Well, guess what? There's more. Not only did Tom have the best season of his career and put up an incredible performance in that final game, he was also up for his 6th Super Bowl win. And if you guys know how the NFL works, you know almost everyone was rooting for him to fail. Now imagine performing well despite all the pressure throughout the season, thinking you're actually gonna win the Super Bowl, bringing your children to the game, and then losing. And remember, after all of that, he had to deal with his kids' tears as well. The loss affected Tom Terrific so much that he admitted to not being over it more than a year later. And who can blame him? Now, as insanely tragic as this was, guys, it's really only the beginning. TB12's heartbreak didn't end in 2018. Since 2021 wasn't any kinder to the legend. I'm not exaggerating, guys. If that 2018 loss to the Eagles was tragic, you're in for a gut-wrenching experience with what I'm about to go over. Now, before I get into this, I want you guys to remember how much the fans love to root against Tom. And yet he's been playing longer than anyone else at the top of the NFL. Still, this means he has almost no room for error, and if he ever does have an embarrassing moment, well, you can bet that the fans and the commentators will punish him for it. And that's exactly what happened in 2021. On December 19th, Brady and the Bucs were completely shut out in a 9-0 loss to the New Orleans Saints. This sort of shutout loss is pretty painful on its own, but once again, things often end up going deeper when it comes to Tom. A shutout loss was a huge deal for TB12 at this point in his career, and this was the first time he'd been unable to score a point in 15 years. It was honestly hard to watch, and the comments about how he was a has-been came in like the Great Flood. I mean, everyone was all over this, and Brady's future in the game was called into question. I don't know about you, but I personally can't imagine how tough this must have been for Brady. But if you still need some more context, well, unfortunately, it didn't end there. Like I said, those comments about Brady being past his prime came rushing in. And that old classic about how Tom was only good when he was with the Pats was also thrown around. Now, I'm sure all of those things on top of that embarrassing shutout loss must have stung, but one thing that I'm sure caused more emotional damage than anything else was when some people made the case that Brady wasn't the GOAT. Now, as fun as it may be to hate on the guy, I'm sure most of you agree that this is ridiculous. But hey, the fact is, Tom's been shut out 3 times over the course of his career, and the 2 other great quarterbacks of NFL history that he's often compared to, Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, went their whole careers without a single shutout. Ouch. Imagine losing in one of your most embarrassing losses at one of the worst times in your career and having that thrown in your face. It's tough to be Tom, man. But if you're gonna feel bad for the guy, wait till after I'm done laying all of this sadness on you because we're not done. No, a similar heartbreak sort of piled on to this one in the 2022 season. Now, in isolation, this one may not seem as bad as the last one, but believe me, in the grand scheme of Tom's career, what happened in 2022 was much worse than anything I've mentioned so far. Honestly, with so many things going wrong and being used against him to try and prove that he's not great anymore, I'm kind of shocked that he can keep going. Like, I remember in one of his older interviews, he talked about how one thing he had was mental toughness. And I've got to say, I definitely see it. Anyway, in 2022, Tom and his Bucs ended up losing to the Cleveland Browns, bringing their record for the season to 5-6. Now, this alone was a huge deal. For the first time, Brady was facing a losing record. But what made it even worse was the fact that he lost to 3 quarterbacks who weren't even regular starters for their teams. Think about it, guys. This was pretty embarrassing, and you can bet Brady was disappointed about it. Believe me when I tell you, the haters really used this to try to break this man's spirit. For those of you who've survived this long, there's still some TB12 tragedy to go. I mean, even the haters were sad after what this man had to deal with in 2023. Now, if you guys don't know, ever since Brady moved to the Bucs, his luck hasn't been the best. I mean, he's continued to accomplish great things and prove that he's the best, but the Bucs haven't really been the most consistent team. And everyone was honestly really sad for Brady when the Bucs ended their season on a 31-14 loss to the Cowboys. Yeah, that alone was heartbreaking because it seemed like Tom's future with the team and his ability to play the game he clearly loves so much was on the line. Now, the season had been tough throughout, and everyone could see this. But what really broke everyone's hearts was when mic'd up footage of Tom was released from the game against the San Francisco 49ers. Now keep in mind, for that extra punch of sadness, that the 49ers were TB12's favorite team growing up. So this was a pretty important match for him. But guys, the Bucs literally just gave up midway, and the footage showed how desperately Tom was trying to keep the team together. But did that work? Well, clearly not, which makes the whole thing even worse. Yep, the match kept getting worse and worse for the Bucs. And it got to the tragic point where Tom was pretty much the only one who was even trying to win anymore. It honestly hurt to watch him give the broken team a pep talk, and his heart was clearly in it when he told them that they were there to fight. But guys, let me tell you, those men did not care anymore. They didn't push back, and the internet had another catalog of sad Brady photos after the match. I mean, it was bad enough that everyone was telling Tom to just dump the Bucs and move on, because clearly that man's not getting anywhere with that team. After all of this, there's still one thing I haven't gone over yet, and it just might be the most heartbreaking Tom Brady moment ever. Of course, it was the whole fiasco with his wife, and you've got to understand, Tom's a family man through and through. He loves his children, and being a father means a lot to this man. I mean, just look at how he teared up telling reporters about how his own father was his hero. Now imagine the pain this man must have gone through as his marital issues with his wife were leaked to the public while he was still in the middle of a season. It turned into an absolute nightmare. Since he was on the verge of a divorce and his kids were going through that pain, it really is hard to be TB12, that's for sure. So from the very public and embarrassing spat with his wife in 2022 to his Super Bowl loss to the Eagles back in 2018, those were the most heartbreaking moments from Tom Brady's time in the limelight.